Now, actor Tom Hardy has played everything, actually, from a sci-fi alien in Star Trek to a World War II soldier in the fabulous Band of Brothers. But without doubt, his latest role is definitely his most controversial.
In his new film, he's transformed himself into the most notorious prisoner in British history. Tom Hardy joins us in just a moment, but first, here he is as Charles Bronson.
Don't get me wrong, for most people, prison is tough. A monotonous nightmare. 24 hours a day. 7 days a week. 365 days a year of pure, unadulterated living, breathing hell.
Well, Tom Hardy joins us now. This is a film that isn't for the faint-hearted, not only for the person who goes to see it, for the viewer, but also as an actor, because this has been, once again, another change in body shape for you.
Yeah.
You bulked up big time for that one.
Well, yeah.
So that's, I mean, because point out just how much your size and shape you're prepared to change for a role. As Stuart Alive Backwards, of course, you were a heroin addict, so you sort of starved yourself for that and became emaciated and very small. And then for this particular role, you bulked yourself up. The filming was delayed, so you slim yourself back down again.
For Stuart.
Yeah. And then went into the theatre.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, your tailor must be a nightmare.
I've got suits in different sizes. Yeah.
Have
the
you?
last couple of years. Yeah.
So what did you do to yourself for this particular role?
Well, I've sort of fluctuated between up and down, between 3 stone, lighter and heavier in the last 2 years, really. Which isn't really that sensible unless you do it properly.
Yeah.
But I did with the help of a nutritionist and Lisa Jeans on Stuart, and so I was actually really, really fit when I lost all the weight on that. And the second time around when I had to put the weight on for Charlie, I worked again with my trainer Peanut, and we put it on in 5 weeks to about 2.5 stone.
Wow.
But it was a lot of...
How many press-ups in a day?
Well, it was more really carrying Peanut up and down the stairs and using him as a resistance machine.
How big is Peanut?
He's 16 stone. Yeah.
Hmm.
But you know, he was my gym, as it were, and pushed the floor, and it goes on very quickly. You send signals to your muscles, and they remember the last time you were there.
So you don't have to use steroids or anything like that to bulk
absolutely
yourself
not.
up in any way.
No.
So playing the role of Charles Bronson, who, you know, what the ordinary person reads in the newspaper is one very scary, violent man. You were asked to play the role. You were obviously, I don't know, were you fascinated by him or a bit scared by him?
Well, a bit of both. I mean, in all honesty, of course, I was nervous to open the case file, as it were.
Yeah.
But largely because of the prejudice that I had built up from information which had been guided in from one direction, really from tabloid papers or, and sort of alarmist reactions to his behaviour from those who, hadn't necessarily met him. So in many ways, it was a case of actually having to meet him to find out for myself what the truth of that situation was.
And you have met him on several occasions. You speak to him often on the phone.
Not so much now, but yes.
When you were doing it.
Over the past 4 years, yeah, I've visited him regularly and spoke to him at least 2 or 3 times a week. Yeah.
And so, what do you think? What is the man that you find?
It was a slow burn relationship, but I've grown to be very fond of him actually, and he's very articulate and gentle and warm and funny.
We ought to. I've got a list of things here, and you say that we have to be very careful that you reflect what are the facts and not necessarily the sort of newspaper stories.
Right.
But if I'm right in saying this, let's read some of this out. So he was born Michael Peterson in 1952. Branded Britain's most violent prisoner. In 1974, at the age of 19, he was sentenced to 7 years in prison for a bungled armed robbery. His original 7-year sentence was doubled for acts of violence within the prison. He was released for the first time in 1988 and spent 68 days as a free man, then arrested for armed robbery and jailed again. Released again in the 9th of November 1992, 53 days before he was back in jail before being arrested for conspiracy to rob. In the years that he's been in prison, he's taken 11 hostages. He staged 9 rooftop protests and assaulted numerous prison wardens and inmates. In 1999, he took the prison art teacher Phil Danielson hostage for 44 hours, the longest siege in British prison history. And in 2000, he was sentenced to life with a 3-year tariff. Of the 34 years he spent in prison, 30 of those have been in solitary confinement, and he's spent time in over 120 different prisons. So those are the facts, aren't they?
It's not a good look, is it?
No, it's not a good look. No.
Yeah.
So once again, tell us about the man that you know.
Well, the man that I know was, obviously I had to put his past and facts behind me when I went in to meet him and take him as a friend, as an observation study as well, because my job is to observe and reflect a man, who's in front of me, and to obviously I was aware that there was parts of him that would maybe want to manipulate me or have me as his puppet, or some way that I'm some kind of vehicle to the outside world, and in some way he could program me to do his will. But that's
Is he a clever man?
Of course he is, yeah.
Yeah.
But that wasn't the case, and I'm quite with the work that I do, I'm just there to observe and reflect what I see. There's no judgment in this fact that I'm not playing a bias. I'm not trying to free him. There's no agenda for me. So the relationship took place from that very specific place, and so I took Charlie as I found him, and of course I provided a service for him in some way. But my problem really was to get as close to as many characteristics of his as possible, and also listen to his stories and how he told stories, and what stories were on repeat and what weren't, and what stories he would tell you with different people in which were the same, and to pick between them and find patterns which were similar, so that I could actually choose, in another way, in a sort of armchair pat psychology way that us actors love doing, facts of our own, of patterns that aren't so random, but that I could use tangibly in a performance from a script.
When you were talking to him, did you ask him about these moments when he becomes extremely violent and what he thinks about his actions?
No. At times, sometimes I would probe for certain subjects, but I would talk loosely around, and I was looking for reactions from him, for me, in my own private relationship with him, actually, and it's a very odd situation to be in, because I'm not his doctor, I'm not his solicitor or lawyer, I'm not a family member. I've technically come as an actor, with my ego to say, look, I think I can play you, and obviously it's going to do my career no end of good, and doesn't really fulfil me with a great sense of well-being. Actually, there's also a purpose for me to be there. I really love what I do, So I wanted to get as much out of the meetings as possible. I think I wasn't there to judge him or question him why. I think that would have been, but more to look at his reactions in situations. It's because he's a reactive human being.
Amanda Burton plays.
I'm very lucky.
Amanda Burton plays his mother. And you stayed with his mother, I think, didn't you?
I was going to, actually, and I couldn't. We couldn't get up there to stay in time. But I mean, I'm still welcome to go and stay with her.
Yeah. Did you meet her?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So what's she like?
She's lovely. She's really lovely. As often as I obviously can't speak for Phil Danielson or any of Charlie's victims, and I wouldn't try to. But I can only speak from my personal experience, and that's always subject to change at any moment, isn't it? But my personal experience of meeting him and the man was much more pedestrian and mundane than that which I had thought, was alarmed and expected this monster. The man that I met wasn't a monster. And, massive anger problems, incredibly charismatic, very, very funny, but very insightful and very gentle and calm too. Very interesting. A very interesting person. And of course Lord Longford spent an awful lot of time with him as well, and so I thought there are people who have spent
critics of the movie, including some people within the prison system, say that it glorifies violence, it makes him more notorious. What do you say to that?
I'm not sure if it does. I think actually if you watch the movie, it's quite a sad story really. It shows that the film does two things. I think Nicholas Winding Refn has showed you quite a side, not really a biopic about Charles Bronson, but an ode on why celebrity culture is so important to us, and what ambition is, and what's important about being famous, which caters for an awful lot of celebrity. And it just so happens that Charlie's the subject of this topic, and it's also a loose biopic of his life. I don't think it glamorises his life, because subsequent his reaction is that for every reaction that he has, the reaction is that he's compounded and confined to further abuse, and subsequently locked in cages which become tighter and tighter and tighter until he's completely forgotten. And that, the fighting system is not going to work. It's tragic, actually.